All right, let's talk about something tricky. Employment discrimination. It's one of those areas where the line between getting fired for a legit reason and an illegal one can be incredibly blurry. And honestly, proving what really happened is half the battle.
So how do you even know, right? Imagine you're let go or passed over for a promotion. Your boss gives you a reason. Maybe it's restructuring, maybe it's your performance. But you've got this nagging feeling in the back of your head. Was that the real reason? Or was it actually about your age, your race, maybe the fact that you're pregnant? Getting to the truth of an employer's motive, well, that's the whole challenge.
So, to really get a handle on this, we're going to look at 5 real stories of real people who took their employers to court. By digging into their cases, some wins, some losses, we could start to see what actually works, what separates a winning case from one that just falls apart.
Let's start with the winners. We've got 2 people who went up against their employers and won. And their victories really come down to understanding one single super important legal idea.
And that idea is pretext. Think of it like a legal smokescreen. The employer puts up this official, legitimate-sounding reason for why they did what they did, but the employee's job is to prove that it's all just a cover story, a pretext for the real, illegal reason.
So let's meet Miss Hegwine. She applied for a job at Longview Fiber Company, but she was denied. She was convinced it was because she was pregnant, so she filed a lawsuit for sex discrimination. The company, naturally, had a different story. The company's defense was basically a 2-punch combo. First, they said a new, heavier lifting requirement was a business necessity, meaning it was absolutely crucial for the job. Second, they argued that not being pregnant was a bona fide occupational qualification, or BFOQ. That's a fancy way of saying only a non-pregnant person could do the job safely. So how did she fight back? Well, this is the kicker. Hegwine showed the court that the company actually changed the lifting requirements to be tougher after she had already submitted her application. That timing looked really, really suspicious. It proved their business necessity wasn't some long-standing rule. It was a pretext, cooked up just to keep her out. And just like that, she won.
Okay, on to our second winner, Mr. Zhang. His case also came down to proving that the employer's reason was just a bunch of smoke. He was up for a promotion at a bank, got denied, and was told it was because of his Cambodian accent. So he sued for national origin discrimination.
So the bank's whole story was that his accent got in the way of his job. But this is where things get interesting. His own colleagues took the stand for him. They testified that no, he was great with customers and had a pleasant manner. All of a sudden, the bank's official reasons started to look pretty shaky.
And the evidence just kept coming. I mean, not only was he praised for his great work, but get this, he had already been doing the job they refused to promote him to. He'd been filling in for 2 years and had basically been running that position for the last 8 months. He'd already proven he could do it. So yeah, the court saw right through the bank's flimsy excuse. They ruled that the accent was just a pretext, and they awarded Mr. Sheng almost $389,000 in damages. This wasn't just about being right, it was about getting real compensation. Okay, so those were pretty clear wins, but let's be real, it's not always so black and white. Now we're going to look at 2 cases that were much murkier, strong enough to get in front of a jury, but with no guarantee of a win. First up is Miss Urasini. She believed she was laid off because of her age and sued for age discrimination. What makes her case so wild is that it shows how the law itself can literally change right in the middle of a fight. Okay, check out this timeline. In 2006, the court agrees she has a strong enough case to go to trial. Things are looking up. But then, 3 years later in 2009, bam! A Supreme Court decision completely changes the rules for age discrimination. Suddenly, the entire burden of proof is on the employee. Before, the company had to prove its reasons were legit. After 2009, the employee had to prove that age was the deciding factor. That made winning these cases way, way tougher. All right, now for a really complex one. This is Mr. Smith, who sued for race discrimination. And here's the twist that makes it so complicated. The manager who fired him was also African American. So why did this go to a jury? Because the evidence pointed to a very subtle kind of discrimination. The argument wasn't that the manager was biased against African Americans in general. It was that he held Mr. Smith, the only other black person in the office, to an impossibly high standard that he didn't apply to any of the white employees. A jury had to decide if that unequal pressure was itself a form of illegal discrimination. And that brings us to our final story. This is what happens when a situation feels wrong, but the evidence just doesn't clear the very high bars set by the legal system.
This case never even made it to a jury.
This is Mr. Larachi's case. He was fired and he sued, claiming it was because of his race and his religion as a Muslim. Though unlike the others we've looked at, his case was dismissed by a judge before it ever got to trial.
The company laid out several non-discriminatory reasons for firing him. And here's the incredibly difficult mountain he had to climb. The court said he had to prove that every single one of the company's reasons was a pretext. It wasn't enough to find a crack in one of their arguments. He had to completely tear down their entire defense.
Now, Mr. Larachi did have some evidence. For example, his boss made a weird comment about Valentine's Day that felt insensitive to his Muslim faith. But the court's view was that while the comments might have been tactless or clumsy, they didn't prove the boss had discriminatory intent. And that's a huge distinction. Legally, being a bad manager isn't the same as being a discriminatory one. Case dismissed.
So we've walked through 5 very different scenarios. What's the takeaway here? What's that fine line that separates a winning case from a losing one?
Well, let's just lay it all out. In the winning cases, Hegwine and Zhang had direct evidence, hard facts, that totally contradicted what their employers were saying. Think about the suspicious timing or the co-worker's testimony. They proved pretext. But in the losing case, Larachi's evidence was more circumstantial. The company's reasons, even if he didn't love them, were still plausible enough that he couldn't completely disprove them all.
So if you take one thing away from this, it's this. Just feeling like you've been discriminated against isn't enough to win a lawsuit. You need strong, direct evidence that can pick apart and dismantle the official story your employer is telling. Without that kind of proof, a case can get thrown out before a jury ever even hears it.
And that leaves us with a pretty tough final question, doesn't it? If it's this hard to prove what an employer was really thinking, and if just being insensitive isn't enough to break the law, what does that really mean for our chances of getting true fairness and justice at work?